computer. So thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Andy Brown. I did have a question. My hand was up at the back for the previous lady from Bark, but I'll ask it a wee bit later. This is not, I'm not going to win any prizes for this. It's not a data creativity award. If I win anything, it'll be your attention maybe for the next 10 minutes or so, where I talk to you a little bit about what we see going on in the market, share some thoughts with you, and pose maybe one or two questions to you for what does it really mean in terms of measurement and our industry going forward. The paper's described as Winning in the Age of Authenticity. That's the name of the publication, actually. So most of the data I'm going to show you here is built on a study that's called Dimension. We're a media measurement business. We measure where ads run, what we call advertising intelligence, advertising expenditure. We do audience measurement, how many people are watching TV, readership, digital, etc. We also do consumer targeting. Our best-known service is TGI, where we build targets for consumers, online and offline. And then we also track, quite interestingly, going back to the Indian presentation, we also track what people are saying about the media in real time and link that data back to not just social, across all media, and link that back to their other information. The study itself has been running for 3 years now. It covers 5 markets. It's not meant to be totally exhaustive. It's meant to give an overview of what we think is happening in the world. Those markets represent around $350 billion of advertising, so they're quite significant markets in that respect. The methodology is quite simple, but it's a little bit unusual. We have 5,000 what we call connected consumers, so you must be connected to the web in order to be included in the sample. You have to be over the age of 18. In addition to that piece, the quantitative piece from consumers, we also have what I call an expert panel. So we also interview people from the industry as to what they feel is going on in the industry. And there's a number of the respondents actually in the room here. You can see an idea of the brands. As I say, a number of them are represented in here. What I'd also say at this point is that if you're interested in knowing more about this report, it's a free report to anybody. Please just go to the Kantar website /dimensions and you can download a copy. Even if you just want to read your own quote played back to you, those of you that are in the expert panel. I'm going to call out a couple of things. The first thing I'd like to talk about is attitudes towards advertising. How do consumers actually feel about advertising? This is not unique as a story. The lowest pickup we got was in the UK and the US, where only 10% of people said that they actually enjoy or accept advertising. The Chinese were slightly more open to it at 20%. And that's really extraordinarily low and is a bit of an alarm bell, I think, for us as an industry. If you dig down into the report, you'll see information about why people feel this way about advertising. A lot of it is to do with excess frequency in a digital context, selling to them without being transparent or authentic, which is something I'll come back to in a minute. But this is really, if you check out studies from people like the Advertising Association, there's US in the UK, there's a couple of US studies which also will verify that consumers are not enjoying advertising in the same way that they used to, and we need to, as an industry, respond to that. What do they do about it? Well, it depends where you are in the world. We've been tracking ad blockers now across the 3 years, and the good news, I suppose, is that it's not really changing. The penetration of ad blocking is not moving significantly, at least in the markets that we were tracking. You do see some geographic discrepancies, so even though China was the most excited about advertising with 20%, they're also the country that most likely to have ad blocking. Brazil, on the other hand, less likely to have ad blocking. But generally speaking, you can see that the trends are fairly flat there. And then if you pull some insight from our panel, what do they say? So this is from Kirk Olson from Horizon Media. You know, he's basically saying, you know, ad avoidance is not the big factor. What's really changing is the abundance of premium content that people will consume without advertising. So that might be Netflix and some of those kind of services, and that's something I'll come back to in just a moment. The other thing that we talk about in this report is authenticity in terms of communication. You know, there is a breakdown of trust, whether you call it driven off fake news, whether you base it on over-targeting. There is a growing cynicism of consumers about the way that they're communicated with. So how do you do that authentically? This is a very simplistic analysis. What we do is we've asked consumers what sources do they use to find out information about a brand or a particular subject. What we've then done is to say, how much do you trust those sources that you reference? So if you then look at that, you know, what it shows is the importance really of word of mouth at one end. Friends and family are very influential. Interesting, I was involved in the P&G hackathon when we were looking at mothers with new mothers. Interestingly enough, I don't think we had anything there that came out in terms of word of mouth and influence of older generations of mothers and their kids. That word of mouth is important. The concern, of course, is that advertising is the lowest trusted of all of them. So I guess the takeaway is what a brand needs now to do is to be sensitive to this, or what an advertiser needs to do is to be sensitive to the receptivity of the audience and the different media that are used. And to try and build a campaign, I think typically, people don't buy campaigns typically in one medium anymore, they buy multimedia, but to try to get this balance right between paid, owned and earned media. I'm going to finish off with the last couple of minutes I have left talking about measurement, and it's a shame in one sense because I'm going to talk about video measurement, and there's a whole meeting taking place about 100 yards from here talking about video measurement. But this is something that I've been talking about now for a while. I talk about why isn't everything measurable? You know, we've got the technology. We can pretty much measure whatever we want from an audience measurement point of view. Why doesn't it happen? I think it's very simple. There's two reasons: politics and economics. People have to want to work together and come to a common solution. They also have to be able to afford the solution, which is another challenge. And of course, different solutions drive different economic outcomes for some of the participants in the measurement system. And what I thought I'd show you here, this is some information taken out of the Norwegian study, the joint industry study in Norway. Now, this data isn't currency. This data sits below the currency. So this isn't used for trading, it's used for planning. So it's not officially part of the ratings service in Norway. But we put a piece of technology called a router meter, or a router meter if you're American, into a home, and it will track streaming services alongside the regular people meter captured content that we would through a typical television audience measurement panel. And what's quite interesting is, if you look at the regular broadcast here, which is linear broadcast, including DVR viewing, we then put that in the context of YouTube minutes, broadcaster tagged, so that's when a broadcaster has a player, we insert a tag in the content, and we're able to track that back and add that back to the panel, and Netflix. And I suppose it's quite interesting in a way, and by the way, yes, we can break it down by which device they were tracking it through, which they were watching through in that home. And what's quite interesting, of course, is it puts sort of YouTube and Netflix in a context of the rest of the viewing. And at one level, you wouldn't be overly concerned about that if you're a traditional broadcast network, but you might be more concerned when you begin to break that down by age, and you can see a much bigger influence of the streaming services on the younger age groups in Norway. And this is one of the challenges. So we can measure this stuff, but you know, This doesn't sit in the currency, this sits outside the currency. This doesn't include digital video at the deeper level, but we can measure that. And I guess that's my closing comment on this area. You know, we hear a lot about first-party data, and it's wonderful. You can do amazing things with first-party data. It has a role in measurement as well. Why do I think it has a role in measurement, and why do I think it's not enough? Is because if you think about it, it may be great for Netflix to be able to create new TV series, or whatever we're going to call them, streaming series, new content entirely based on their own metrics from their own platform. And that's great, whilst they're growing at 20% and subscriptions are growing. What happens when there are 7 Netflix? We're not far away from having 7 Netflix, and their audience share goes down. What's the first question Mr. Hastings is going to ask is, where's my audience gone? Where's it gone to? Your first-party data will not tell you that. And we as an industry have to start being more open-minded about bridging some of these different data sets. So linking first-party with third-party data sets to produce a measurement solution. What we describe measurement being a team sport. So thank you very much for your time. Hopefully I've stimulated 1 or 2 thoughts or 1 or 2 questions, and I'll open up for those questions now. So thank you.
Thank you. We have 1 or 2 minutes for questions opening for the audience. So if there are any questions, please raise your hand. All right. Don't think any questions are there. So thank you so much, Andy, for this great presentation.